Thank you to the Elon Gospel Choir for blessing us this morning. To all the faculty, staff, and students, thank you for being here and spending part of your morning in this sacred space. With the exception of the Black Excellence Awards and dawning of the Kente, Numen Lumen is one of my most favorite Elon traditions, because each time that I've attended, every speaker has forced me to engage in one of my most valued activities, reflection. In full disclosure, I wrestled with which stories of personal change I wanted to share, worrying about how it would be received and if I would have the fortitude to share these stories without shedding tears. As I reflected, I came to the conclusion that my journey has not been without tears, so why should this talk? The pieces of my journey are my own, but my hope for you is to engage in some reflection in our short time together. The definition of journey is the act of traveling from one place to the other. The year was 1980, and she was a second-year civil engineering student. Though school was going well, a civil war had broken out, and the country was growing divided. Support the movement or counter the government? Her cousin propositioned her to join the guerrillas. Pick a side. The decision wasn't simple, but instead of participating in a war, she set off, never knowing if or when she would see her family again. She traveled through Guatemala and Mexico with a group of men she never knew. Exhaustion from miles of walking, hiding, several bus rides, and a blistering fear of the unknown was all that she experienced. After having paid the coyotes, or guides, all she had left was $5. She decided to make the trek in search for a better life, a life without war, and a life with greater dreams. Having journeyed all this way, she came to the Rio Grande and was told to swim as fast as she could as to not get swept in the current. As she began to kick her feet and extend her arms, she stopped to look around and saw others struggling and drowning. Aware of the high risk of being caught, she knew she had to cross in order to help the others. She was determined to cross. As she reached the shore, she aided a few others across the river. Finally, she had reached the other side and thought freedom was near. With only the moonlight to guide her steps, she pressed on and continued on her journey. The $5 soaking through her jeans. Suddenly, the sight of blue and red lights appeared in the distance. The lights were getting closer, and the group of people who had made it across the river began to scatter. She hid in a bush while helicopters and immigration officers scoured the area. She prayed a deep prayer with her eyes closed. As she prayed, she had not realized that she must have been laying on an anthill because the bugs started to consume her. The bugs itching and biting, piercing her skin with pain, yet she did not make a sound. An hour, which felt like an eternity, had elapsed, and the red and blue lights faded away in the distance. They were gone, and she and two others were now on American soil, left alone to create a new life. When I was 13 and my mother told me about her journey to the United States, I knew then that no journey of mine would ever compare to the journey that she had taken. I was in awe of her unwavering determination through such a tough journey and always wondered, how does she survive this? How does she live to tell it? When I asked her this question, she responded, through the grace and guidance of God, I made it. Like many things our parents tell us, I heard her, but I wasn't listening. Little did I know at that time the seed was planted, but I had to go on my own journeys to understand the message. I spend my days listening to student stories, learning about their lives, and pushing them to find purpose. So it's not often that I get to share pieces of my own life. This year's theme is the meaning of journey, personal stories of change. I hope to illustrate the anchor that has been present in all of my journeys and stories of change. For those of you who know me well, know that I have an unhealthy obsession with movies and can probably recite lines from several movies, all of the Rockies, Coming to America, Remember the Titans, just to name a few. In fact, if I had it my way, life would consist of monologues from different movies where you could play Guess That Film. One of my favorite movies is Cool Runnings. And starting January 1st, 2020, it will be on Disney+. Again, unhealthy obsession. For those of you who have never heard of the film, it is basically about 4 Jamaican athletes who were sprinters trying to make the Olympics for the Jamaican national team. After some setbacks and losing the opportunity to attend the Olympics for track and field, they decided to give bobsledding a try. Now, I'll spare you the rest of the details in case you want to watch it, but I enjoyed this movie because it demonstrated their journey, full of resilience, self-actualization, cultural pride, family, and failure, similar to the journey of my own life. My most favorite part of the movie is when they share the meaning of Cool Runnings. Peace be the journey. Somehow, throughout the ups and downs of my own life, I've been able to find peace, a peace that has been fulfilled through the power of prayer. I'd like to share 3 stories of personal change and growth, all of which are not complete. The first, my journey to marriage. During my late teens and 20s, I went on several dates, had some steady relationships, got my heart broken, and learned a lot about myself. Yet I was always feeling as though there was a part of my life missing. I had done everything in my control to pursue a partner and make things work. When all else failed, I turned to God and restarted attending church. My church pastor encouraged the congregation to read a book called The Circle Maker by Mark Batterson. I spent several late nights enthralled in deep reading and deep prayer. In The Circle Maker was the legend of Honey, a man of the people who wanted greatly to feed his community. The town he lived in experienced a drought, and there was little food and no water. Honey prayed daily for it to rain, and as each day passed with no rain, he pressed on. One day, he decided to be bold with his prayer and drew a circle in the dirt around him. He prayed and declared to God that he would not move from that circle until the rain came down from the heavens. Soon after his bold prayer, the rain came, and Honey knew that his prayer worked. Now, I thought to myself, wow, this guy was bold, declared to God all of this. What if I did this and asked God to send me a life partner? So I did. I drew my little circle around in the woods near my apartment. I engaged in deep prayer. But instead of asking God for a life partner, I prayed for peace in the journey towards searching for a life partner. Within 2 months of making that circle, I met my wife. Within the book, I learned about an acronym that I use regularly to this day, and the acronym is PUSH, Pray Until Something Happens. The second story I will share is about the journey of playing the role of a child to becoming a caregiver to my parents. Growing up, my parents were everything to me and my brother: providers, educators, spiritual leaders, moral developers, disciplinarians, and so forth. Our relationship was one of respect and deference. When I left home for college, I had not realized that the relationship would change, but I found myself growing more distant from my parents. The types of conversations we had felt childlike to me. My mother often asking me if I ate and if I had clean clothes. My dad asking me about my progress in school. At the time, I didn't appreciate these questions or the conversations. You see, as a first-generation student, I allowed the intellectual environment of higher education to create a distance between me and my parents, who did not have higher education, and I no longer valued our conversations. As a child of immigrant parents, the expectation of elderly care is an unspoken one, but it is just that, an expectation. No one prepared me for the responsibilities this would entail. My parents sacrificed their own education, finances, time, and health so that my brother and I could live greater lives than themselves. Indeed, the fruit of the tree is not for the tree. The Lord called my mother home on April 19, 2015, the day after my dad's 68th birthday. In her last few years of life, I found myself being a counselor, a doctor, a therapist, a mediator, a life coach, a nutritionist, a lawyer, an advocate to my parents. When she passed, I knew that supporting my father would be even more difficult. The same year, I got married, and I was starting my own life and family. I felt the tension of cleaving from my parents. I prayed to God for guidance on how to navigate this tension and this new life. I was selfish, and I wanted to start my own life. I sought therapy and prayed harder as I supported my dad as he began his new life as a widower. I encountered my dad unprepared to live a life of retirement, especially to live a life of retirement without his wife. So much of his emotional needs fell on me, and I found myself overwhelmed. How would I continue without my mother? How would I support my father, who was now a widower? My mom cooked, she cleaned, she did the laundry, she managed finances. Who would help him? The worry set in, but I remembered what my mom taught me. Through the grace and guidance of God, you will make it. So I prayed. Again, I didn't ask for answers. I asked God for peace in whatever was forthcoming. 4 years after her death, I've managed to support my dad through tough love and deep prayer. The final story I will share is about my journey to fatherhood. March 11th, 2018. It was a special day as my wife and I welcomed Mateo Emmanuel Jean to this world. Mateo, the Spanish version of Matthew, means gift from God. Emmanuel means God is with us. When you combine the two names together, a gift from God is with us. Despite this gift, the worries and anxieties of being a dad were piercing through my skin. My wife and I read books together, and I could probably see better. My wife and I read books together to understand how to be great parents. We traded stories on how we were raised and things we would continue and things we would do differently. I spent a lot of time worrying about the type of father I would be. How would I ingrain in my son the values and build his character? I worried to the point where fatherhood became more of a fear than an enjoyment. Finally, he was here, and I had no clue what I was doing. The very sight of him took all that worry away because I knew God's gift was with us. What no one told me was that God's gift came with sleepless nights, crying, blowouts, constant feeding, and the fear of failure always being present in my life. At times, my worry became overwhelming, and I didn't know what to do. Again, I recalled the tough moments in my life and remembered to pray. In all my stories and journey, I have changed. My positioning has changed. My circumstances have changed, but my faith has not. In my most vulnerable moments, I had to do something many of us struggle with: surrender and submit. But I decided my ways weren't working, and my worrying was getting me nowhere. Surrender and submit. Job chapter 22, verse 21 says, "Submit to God and be at peace with him. In this way, prosperity will come to you." I have learned to let go and let God, which is one of the most difficult things to do for someone who appreciates control. Frederick Douglass has a quote that reads, "I prayed for 20 years and received no answer until I prayed with my legs." I realize now that I've lived my life praying with my legs and not allowing God to guide me. This has led me down several roads where I found myself growing distant from God. But a wise person once told me, when you find yourself growing distant from God, remember who left. So, I leave you with food for thought that a mentor and friend recently reminded me, which is, you can pray or you can worry, but you cannot do both. Thank you for joining me this morning, friends. Cool runnings. May peace be your journey.